This is Kelly.
And this is Amy.
And you're listening to Diary of a Death Investigator. So this episode is going to come out a little late, and I feel like we keep saying that, but I do have some good news to share. Thanks for all the people who are sending well wishes my way. I did get some test results back, and good news is it's good news.
Yay!
Yay! So that was a long 2.5 weeks.
For everybody.
Yeah. It was scary. It was a lot of things, but more than anything, it was super stressful. So thanks to everybody who's been patient with us as we've been trying to navigate all of our life.
Life is just kind of weird right now. So there's a lot of good things happening, and life, like you just said, experiences.
Yeah.
Life happenings. It happens.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, I guess like it's nothing that's not normal in a lot of ways, but it's also like, it's just been piling on, and then work's been really crazy for us right now. We're going into the busiest time of year and budget planning. So I've been working until about 10 or 11 o'clock every night and on calls at 8 in the morning. So it's just nothing that none of you aren't experiencing as well. It's just that time management. I mean, actually, I'm pretty good at time management. It's just that there's not enough time to do stuff like this. Maybe if we were making money doing it, it'd be a little bit different, but it's having to sit on the back burner in a lot of ways. So thank you. Also, Belgium, we see you. Thank you for listening. Belgium is 20% of our listeners right now. So it's always fun to see the different countries out there who are listening and that we're touching. So thank you. Thank you. We do have a trigger warning for this episode. This story contains content about suicide. If you or someone you know is in crisis, help is just 3 numbers away. 988 is the crisis hotline, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week across the United States. If you're listening in another country and have a number we can share, please email us at Kelly@Diary of a Death Investigator or message us on our Instagram page, Diary of a Death Investigator. We're recording at the end of September, and it is still suicide
Prevention
awareness
month. Yeah.
So we were able to find some numbers for some of you guys. So we do have a number for Canada. You can text 45645. France is 0145394000. South Africa 0800567567. Australia, we see you 131114. Germany, this is a really long one, but worth it. 0800-111-0111. Brazil, your number is 188 free to call. Sorry, I don't have the numbers for that, but
You mean it's not 8675309?
no. Italy, 199-284-284. So if we missed anybody and you guys do have numbers, please send them to us, and we're happy to share them as well.
Yes. And like I've said the last time, this is a really important topic. And I think it's super important for anyone to seek help if that's what they need. So it's affected a lot of people in my life. And I, of course, worked through a lot of that as well. So I've seen it. And like I said, it affects everybody around you. So
for episode 58, it's a twofer. So last week, I don't want to spoil anything, but we put out an episode about dogs, woman's not so best friend. And the reason that episode came about is because I literally hate walking the dog. It's one of the worst chores ever. But
that's what Kelly thinks, which Kelly would probably rather prefer to clean. And I'm not like a cleaner person, and I love taking my dogs. So that's where we differ.
Of course. Yeah. Cause I like clean every day. But I started thinking, I was like, what other chores can I feel less guilty about having to do or like get out of that would, cause you always think like, well, also I hate working out. So while you're working out, I'm like, you'll make the joke saying like, oh, I'm going to die if I have to do that. Or I'm going to die if I have to do this. Well, then I was like, oh, some people have died while they've done this. So like, has anybody died while cleaning? And so that's what I asked Amy.
I couldn't think of any workout ones, so maybe that is to come.
But so this episode we're calling multi-purpose cleaner.
Well, before we start, there's been a lot of really crazy cases in the news recently. And one that I was going to say blown away, but it's kind of like, ooh, why would you say that considering what happened to this guy?
No.
Well, he kind of got what he was asking for. There was this sheriff, I can't remember what state it's in, but he went into this courtroom where this judge was presiding, and he asked to go back into the judge's chamber with the judge so that they could discuss something. And as soon as they went into the judge's chambers, the sheriff unloaded what witnesses said 6 rounds into the judge, and then walked out of the judge's chambers and put his hands up to surrender. And I was like, whoa, what the heck? That's crazy, because it's like, there's got to be a story to that, right? So as a story developed, which there's still a lot that we don't know, apparently this judge, who was like 52 years old, was having some relations with the sheriff's daughter, who was like 17 years old. So yeah, the sheriff decided to take justice into his own hands, like literally. So I thought that was a...
Well, it's interesting going on because of all the stuff that's going on with, is his name Diddy now? Puff Daddy?
Yeah, P. Diddy. It's not Puff, but yeah, P. Diddy.
No Puffy anymore. Some of you guys might not even remember when it was Puffy.
The 90s.
So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And we're going to have maybe we'll do some like digging for those stories just to give you guys updates along the way. Because Amy sent that to me and I was all, oh, well.
Yeah.
Oh, because we actually don't know. There was something that I wrote down when you sent me that article about like the jury has to find him. I guess that you can find somebody like think that he's guilty but not say that he's guilty, or know that he did it, but like he doesn't have to necessarily be guilty.
No contest. It's saying no contest. So you're not admitting to your guilt, but it's basically like leaving that open to interpretation. So
yeah, like they can say that he did it, but is it like a warranted or justified thing? So anyway, well,
to be continued on both of those things.
All right. Well, so this multi-purpose cleaner episode, Amy, take it away.
Oh, yeah. So again, this was not a case that I worked. It was a case that came into our office. And then it actually turned into like a research topic that one of our investigators ended up doing, like presenting to like our nationwide, they call it NAME, but it's like the National Association for like medical examiners and like investigations. So she had worked this case that I'm going to talk about, but I was the one that was working in the morgue at the time. This body was actually in the garage airing out. So kind of an interesting thing is that this person decided to commit suicide, but this is something that had actually started over in Japan. And I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the easiest way to die, or I couldn't say why someone would choose this. Maybe it's cheaper because it's what you have on hand. I don't know. So this girl, she was actually a nursing student, and she was under a lot of stress, as I think anyone would be that would be in nursing school, or really just in the field or profession of nursing. So,
or like we just talked about, it's just life.
Yeah, really doesn't matter what it is. So yeah, she was a nursing student under a lot of pressure. And so someone had reported that they saw this vehicle in the university parking lot. And they said that there was actually a note on this car, like a caution as to don't open this vehicle without basically like safety precautions, because she knew as a nursing student how deadly that this was, that she did. And luckily, the fire department is like a block away from the university. So they were the ones that actually came onto the scene with the police. And police waited until the fire department got there because they have the equipment or like the masks that can filter out like the smoke and of course other noxious gases. So she had put this note on her window, on the driver's side window, and she was seated in the vehicle. But when they were looking into the vehicle, they could see down on the floorboard on the passenger side that there was this bucket in there. And you've seen those before in Dad's garage. It's like the big buckets that you put like chlorine tablets in.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what was on her floorboard. So essentially what she did was she took these chlorine tablets and then she put like hydrogen or bleach and basically just poured it in to this bucket with all these chlorine tablets, which chlorine by itself is very noxious in itself. And it's so potent. I think, when you take the lid off of it and it kind of hits you in the face, you're just kind of struck back by the smell. And so amplify that in a small enclosure of this vehicle with this gas that she had created with these chemicals. So it's like them saying like, don't use or mix all these chemicals in your home in an enclosed small space, right? Like how many labels have that on them now? I'd like to thank TikTok and all the TikTok cleaners for using 10 different products in their toilet bowl as they're cleaning, because I'm
also,
sure.
But like, I mean, okay, let's be fair here. Like, you're like, oh, you take out all the cleaner out of your cabinets when you go to clean. And then you just are like, oh, I cleaned out that. I'm guilty of sometimes mixing stuff, not thinking like.
I use like 2 things.
Well, I mean, I don't know, like if you're using toilet bowl cleaner, just, I wouldn't know, I guess, to like read stuff. Or if somebody's gone in, like, let's say that you are cleaning with something and then someone has gone in after you. Like, I know a girl who she cleaned with something and then like her roommate cleaned with something, or was like just pouring bleach and then using something else because she was trying to kill. She has an allergy to mold and she was just trying to kill something. And the girl was like, hey, like you have to be really careful. Like you can't mix these 2 things. Like,
yeah,
you'll die.
Right. I think it's like the Clorox green like powder. I think you can't mix that with like bleach. I know, because that will create that like the bubbling chemical reaction. You cannot do those together.
Isn't that like the set? Are you talking about like the powder, the one that comes in the green can?
Yeah.
You have it at your house. And then I used it. And then I mixed it with something else and I was like, I probably shouldn't do that. So I think like, again, who's reading things? Like, I don't know what chemical, I'm not a chemist. I didn't even do good in chemistry.
Well, I will say if you're putting it on just with water and it gives off a strong smell, I don't think adding another strong smelling chemical is a good idea. So, you can just do the sniff test and then you'll pass out. And then that's how you'll figure it out.
Oh, geez.
Well, I mean, that's literally what was happening to people. So that's why they had to put these labels on things, right? Because unknowingly, like you said, you could be mixing these things and you're in your small enclosed bathroom without the vent on and you're exposed to this. So, and what have we learned about what happens when we suffocate? What's happening? You know this. Red blood cells.
Is it like petechia or?
Well,
you get cherry faced.
So you get cherry lividity, but kind of depends on what you are intaking. So whatever your red blood cells, which your red blood cells carry your oxygen. And so whenever you are intaking like a chemical, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's helium or carbon monoxide or these different cleaning mixtures, it's going to replace oxygen in your red blood cells. And then that's why you suffocate, because you're not getting that oxygen to your brain. So really, if these people aren't dying from this, they can have significant head or brain damage. So, and not in the way that you would think like blood on the brain, but it's basically like what they call like encephalopathy, which is like water on the brain. So if you have kind of this head trauma and then you can have like this water on your brain as well that causes more pressure, it can be pretty dangerous. So literally what this had, like I said, it was kind of prevalent in Japan, and they were starting to see a lot of deaths, or what they call basically like a fad. So there's a couple different things that they call it. So it's the hydrogen sulfide suicide, the H2S. So 2 hydrogen makes hydrogen, then that's where you get the sulfide from. The S is sulfur. So that's where you get that chemical compound from. So it's H2S suicide. Some people are referring to it as detergent suicide because it's just basically mix everything in the kitchen sink together. Chemical suicide, and they call it like the suicide fad because this was so prevalent in Japan. So they said that they basically started compiling all this stuff back in 2007 was when they were seeing a lot of this. And I remember even seeing people where they were doing this actually in bathrooms. So they would seal up all the windows and then the doorway as well. So they would tape like the bottom of the door so the gas wouldn't get out. So it'd be like more potent in the bathroom. So they are doing this in the bathroom. And they were also seeing that a lot of these people were actually using their vehicles as well, because, your vehicle is a small enclosed space that will hold in these chemicals pretty well. They had some really interesting information here. That was like the majority of these victims were males and less than 30 years old. And they did leave a warning note. So that's where you get kind of that suicide context.
Where you know that they're doing it?
Yes. Whereas, in a vehicle, that makes it pretty obvious, even though you could have families that would come back and say, well, how did you know this was a suicide? But if someone's doing this in a bathroom, that's where you could basically make the argument, right? Of, well, how do we know they weren't just cleaning the bathroom and it was an accident? So,
because they're taping the doors in the ground and everything else.
Yes, but there again, people like fighting like life insurance policies and stuff like that, because a lot of life insurance policies do not cover suicide. So if you can fight legally in saying, well, here's the evidence, or you can fight the death certificate by saying there wasn't even a note left, so you don't know the intention. And you would have a pathologist, I would say, well, the intent would have been sealing off the doorways or the exits. And so, or airways, because even like vents in the bathrooms as well. So you could say that would be your intent. So basically, that's how doctors will determine like the manner of death as either undetermined or suicide. Is they look at the intent that was made in order to cause the action of the death. So that's where they're saying, yes, there was warning notes, and actually a lot of these people were found in their vehicles. So, and of course, they're found by themselves in their vehicles as well. So these people, when they die from this gas, it not only affects them, but it affects everyone around them. So that's why it's so important for these notes. I mean, at least they were courteous in that fact that they left a note saying that this gas is potent and that's what it is. Like some people I've seen like the notes where they actually put what they used. So, like an officer would be suggested like not to open the vehicle because they're not going to have like the safety precautions that they need to, as to like I said, like a firefighter. So basically how this works is they call it a petrochemical plant, or like sewers or volcanoes, manure pits, that kind of thing. So fatalities of these kinds of people that are actually just responding to these things, it's a secondary toxic effect. So it's a toxic dynamic effect of H2S. So it's similar to cyanide, and that it binds to your cytochromes and it will oxidize. So it's classified as a cellular asphyxiant. So basically what I just said was earlier, this stuff affects your red blood cells, and even is saying like, to the point that it works. I mean, we've heard of cyanide, right? What kind of cases where it's like arsenic, people will put it in their food. The thing with stuff like that is it doesn't.
In the movies. Yeah. It's like those Universal Studio movies, like you go to the back lot, and that's how I feel like cyanide killed them.
Yeah, so I think cyanide does have a bitter taste to it, but that can be hidden with a lot of different spices and stuff like that. You've seen cases of people putting in like coffee or tea. So
also like time out, because isn't bitter like we're finding that people are turned off by bitter. And is that because, and this is what I've heard, I don't know this to be true, your body naturally rejects bitter because it thinks it's being poisoned?
I think that is like an evolutionary type of trait that has been learned, or yeah, like you said, like our body's telling us like it's like an alarm going off. They've also said if you are tasting or smelling something bitter, almost like an almond smell, a lot of times those are people who are about to have strokes or some type of neurological phenomenon. So you see a lot of that kind of stuff when they're like, oh, I'm either about to have some type of episode or I'm being poisoned. So yeah, I mean, that's really interesting that your body now knows. I mean, because that's a survival trait, right? That's how people have survived.
You know, in my industry and the booze business, I sell a pretty popular product that's bitter. Like most people would know it as bitter. And we're just coming off of Negroni week, and Negroni is very bitter, right? So I think that's where we thought it's interesting now that Negronis have become so popular because they're bitter. So people's like instinct is to fight bitter, right? But it's like a learning process that they learn to like it, where most people tend to go towards sweet. Like bitter is just not natural for them. And that's what you'll hear a lot of people say, like, oh, I don't know, that's just so bitter. And their taste, but their mouth starts watering and it's like almost like their body's just rejecting a lot of it. So
danger.
Yeah.
Yeah. The red flags. So literally your eyes might be flashing red. So what this essentially does, so like I said, it's going to replace that oxygen in your red blood cells. So in these high concentrations of the H2S, you'll just basically go into sudden loss of consciousness and what they call the knockdown effect. So like KO'd. And then apnea, which you've heard of, sleep apnea, right? Where you have this like really deep, heavy breathing. And that's basically like everything is kind of struggling to breathe at that point because your body's needing oxygen. And then rapid death. So it's supposed to happen fast, but there are some other things that happen as well when this is going on. So lower level exposures though, like basically if you are surviving this, you will get what they call like pulmonary edema. So pulmonary edema is like having like foam in your lungs. So sometimes you'll have that from like drowning deaths. There again, that's like a suffocation type of thing, right? And then like conjunctivitis. So you're going to have like redness or like red spots. So if you look at in someone's eyes, their eyes are going to look extremely bloodshot. I mean, I'm sure when you clean the bathroom before and you have like this kind of burning effect to your eyeballs, that means that's a very strong, potent chemical that you are using.
So you are saying I shouldn't clean, it could kill me?
Pretty much, yeah. Or like wear a hazmat suit with your M90 masks and your like goggles maybe. So protect everything, every orifice.
We haven't used that word in a long time.
Yeah, you're welcome. I thought you'd like that. And so a lot of this is what they're saying is most often people were using an acidic toilet bowl cleaner as a proton donor and insecticides or bath salts as a sulfur source. So it's basically whatever they had available to them in their bathroom. So like I said, this was really prevalent in Japan first. And then you kind of started to see this popping up in the US as well. And so, like I said, it's like
was it shared on like TikTok, or was TikTok even around during?
No, TikTok wasn't around then, but I mean, YouTube was definitely like a thing. And of course, the internet. If you search anything, there are actually instructions that they said that you can look up online. Yeah, it's like the final exit book, right? I mean, you go to Reddit, you can find out a lot of things other than just gaming facts that I use Reddit for. So also what's crazy is that it's not just males, but it's like children were doing this as well. And I know in Japan, a lot of that reason which I think among that culture, there's a lot of high pressures in society just in general. And then when they feel like there's some type of failure, that is the immediate reaction is like suicide rates. So a lot of people that are in school, so school age, or if it's something that's like a really high stress, high environment job. So sometimes you would even see like doctors. So when these people are going into the hospital for this, like I had said, it's not just the victim, I should say, taking this. And if they are rushed to the hospital, it's also going to affect whoever is treating that patient. And I mean, if that gas is all in the same room of anyone that's in there, it could affect anyone within, well, I don't want to put an exact range because it depends on how big the room is and how potent the chemical is that you were using. And so one report, they're saying that there was this 34-year-old man that tried to kill himself by drinking pesticide. And so he was actually rushed to a hospital. This was in South Japan, and they had to pump his stomach, which I've had other cases where I've had people straight up drink bleach or drink like Drano. Drano is a big one too. It's so crazy. But when people drink this, it not only burns their skin, so around their skin, externally around their mouth and like their chin and their external throat is burning because it's like basically that dribbling or drizzling effect as it's like pouring out of your mouth. Because at some point your body's going to try to reject that too.
Right.
It's burning not only the outside part of your skin in your mouth, but it's burning your mouth and all the way down to your throat and to your stomach because it's very acidic. So a lot of these people, if they survive this, I mean, think about literally like just breathing in fire, what kind of burns that would cause. And as they start to either throw up or like purge that, then that's going to just continue to get all over the external part of your body. So there can be significant skin damage. There's going to be skin grafting, very, very severe internal burning as well. So once it's pumped, it has to be neutralized in the stomach. It's not like fire that you can just put out with, water. So they said that after they had basically pumped this guy's stomach, he had vomited and he released toxic fumes, which sickened more than 50 people, including doctors, patients, and hospital workers. So basically what I'm thinking is it went through the vents of the hospital.
I was wondering how it could hit so many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it not only affected the people that are immediately around them, but I'm sure the fumes went, like I said, through the vents, which a lot of places are on a one ventilator system, even if it's multi-level. So when people are building new autopsy or morgues, like in our new facility that we had, they paid special attention to putting that air unit on a separate unit from everything else so that the rest of the building wasn't being basically affected by the odors and if there was anything toxic. So it's a big safety feature as well. So to continue on with this, the guy ended up actually dying. I'm sure it was because of significant damage internally, probably burns. I'm sure it ate through esophagus and then if it even reached his stomach. So they said that 90 hospital personnel had to be called in to help with the emergency room Wednesday night. So that is how toxic that is. And like they're saying, it's like a pungent odor. So if you are trying not to breathe that in, you're going to be taking in short, quick breaths as well, which is also not necessarily good for you either. So with this case specifically, that we had worked with this girl that came in, once they got her out of her vehicle, of course, her eyes were like bloodshot, red from the gases that had actually touched her eyes, even though she did wear goggles. So they weren't sealed off though. They were like lab goggles. And so some of that had actually seeped through, but also because of the amount of gases that were actually in there. I mean, to a certain extent, that's going to break through if it's not like sealed off to your face, right?
Why would she wear goggles?
Because she knew it was going to burn her eyes. So as you're dying, you don't want to be uncomfortable, right? So she was basically trying to prevent this discomfort that she knew was going to be happening to her eyes. And
even if you close your eyes, would you still like...
Well, have you done, think of even chopping up an onion? It's like your eyes are watering and you're trying to blink, but it's like your eyes are still burning. So as long as you are being exposed to that gas, it's still going to hurt. So yeah, she had those on her. And when they actually brought her in, of course, she's in a body bag, but this was when we were in our old building. So we didn't have our one room that we had that was just for like decomposing people. We had like a suction vent in there, and like that wouldn't even be efficient enough. So they actually had to leave her in the garage bay for her to literally like air out overnight. And they didn't even want to risk exposing everyone to this the next day. So they actually performed that autopsy in the garage. So one thing that was really interesting to me was that when they cracked open her skull to look at her brain looked like this bluish green color because of the gases that were attached to the red blood cells.
Okay, so wait, what color does a brain usually look like?
Your brain should typically look like this pinkish beige color. That's what a healthy brain looks like. And that's going to be for the majority of your brain. Now, once you get more into like the cerebrum kind of area or like more of the inner brain, it could be a little bit darker in color, more like a grayish color, but usually unhealthy brains. So if you see someone that has like severe dementia or something like that, you're just going to see big gaps in the brain. So like hollow places, and it kind of can look like a soggy, broken down brain. So where you have like the water on the brain, where I said like encephalopathy. And anyone that's like a stroke patient or something like that, you'll see like the big blood clots. So your normal red color. So you have like the dura that's basically covering it's like what attaches the skull to like the brain. There's like this kind of film that's in between your brain and your skull. And it's like a protective feature. So you could see that was even discolored as well. And that should be like a yellowish kind of color. And so when they peeled that back off the brain, that's when you could tell, yeah, I had never seen that. And that's the only case that I had seen that in. Even the woman that had drank the bleach, it didn't do that. And that's because she was actually breathing in these gases. So,
okay, wait, I have one more question about brains. We're getting into zombie season, so I have to ask these questions.
Okay.
Have you ever seen like a green brain or like a black brain?
All decomps. Anyone that's a decomp, they're going to have a discolored brain because that's just what happens in the process of decomposition. So you're lucky if they even have a brain at that point.
What about Ebola brain? Would that be like kind of like a decomp brain?
I'm not sure because I haven't seen cases of that. Thank goodness, because that would be terrible.
Yes, for all of us.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, because, well, really, anything that we did like that was like TB or meningitis. They always treated those with like extra precaution. But there again, like meningitis would also kind of make that discoloration as well. It can look kind of green. And that's because meningitis will attack your spinal cord. So that's why it kind of turns your brain that color. So to affect your brain, and she was a young, healthy female otherwise, I personally do not think that would be a very comfortable way to go. I've seen other cases of a gentleman that actually used a vacuum hose and attached that to the exhaust of his car, and then took that hose from the exhaust and let it through his car window. And then he sealed off the car window with duct tape. And he had the car running, and it was running for a long time. So that was definitely carbon monoxide, but it got so hot from the exhaust fumes. He had glasses on. It melted his glasses, and they had the car off for a while by the time I got there, and he was still hot. And he was, of course, bright red, but it also was taking off his top layer of skin. So it literally burned him. So it wasn't just breathing in the gases. It also, like I said, it will damage your skin. So
it's chemicals. It's like It's crazy. You know, if you can smell it or like even taste it in your mouth or whatever, like,
Yeah.
it's like going to the gas station when you put gas in your car and you get that fume wave, right? You're like, whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah. So that's where, like I said, it will affect your brain and like that dura matter around your brain. And that to me is just completely fascinating in itself that you're affected in that way. So I definitely from that day on was like, I'm going to be super careful about what I mix, even if it's an all natural product like Mrs. Meyer's or, something to that effect. And definitely don't drink Drano. So, some of those things, like I said, they can be odorless or tasteless, but I think we've talked about in the past is a lot of times things are given a certain smell so that it is an indicator to us like that is danger, because it's the same thing as with like your natural gas for your house. They add the smell to that so that you're aware if there's a gas leak or something. So like, hey, don't light your burner, your stove, or like light up a cigarette. So some of those things are so noxious in smell, not just because of the chemical, and honestly, a lot of that smell comes from, it's the chemical reaction when they're mixed. So like that bubbling effect, that's your chemical when it's creating and releasing the gas. So no-go zone.
No-go zone.
And definitely pay attention to your labels when you're mixing stuff. I know a lot of stuff can't be mixed with bleach. So you're either bleaching or you're not.
Yeah, just mix it with some water.
I know some people are like, if you ain't bleaching, you ain't trying. And I'm like, I want to live. Because you can actually, in those cases too, if it's not, you can get severely poisoned just from being in something like that for so long, where you can get nauseous, you can get dizzy, you will feel very sick. We actually had one of our investigators had to go to the hospital because she didn't know that she was being exposed to carbon monoxide, because the fire department said that there wasn't any in there. And she was violently sick, like throwing up and very dizzy and head hurt really bad. So that's essentially what happens with those chemicals. So if you're in a bathroom or in closed space and you start to feel dizzy, turn on your vent and get out.
Open your window, open your door, turn on the vent, do all the above. At the beginning of this episode, I said this was a twofer. I said part of it was because I wanted to get out of having to do a chore that I didn't want to do. So, right, so the cleaning. The other part of the fur is that we've been talking before Amy and I started recording. We were talking about how stressful this week has been in general. And obviously this person experienced a extreme amount of stress. And that's why you were saying from school or whatever. So just something to highlight, I think, again, for Suicide Prevention Month. It's just like, you're going to get through it. It's going to be okay. I know I'm not the crisis hotline, but we've been talking about enough stories now that, I think the main thing is tell someone that you're feeling that way. That's the first part of getting home. So, and more people feel that way, I think, than what we're actually told do. So, and that's why, people are always surprised when they're like, oh, wow, I never expected that person to do that. So there isn't always open signs. Also, I think like you feel guilt or you think it's going to be like a burden to tell somebody. And I know like I had been pretty overwhelmed and didn't share something. Like it's been about a month with a friend, and the friend said, once I did tell the person, because I said, you have enough going on. I don't need to add to your plate. It's like, there's priorities, right? Like, again, we're all human and we're all in this together. So I just,
at the end of the day, your life is more important than anything else you have going on.
Well, and I think your body tells you that just from these reactions that, right?
Yeah.
Your body's trying to purge some of these things for survival too. So, don't, I see these memes all the time, and maybe these people are taking this into consideration, but, when you die, even in a situation like this, somebody like Amy comes in and they expose all your dirty secrets.
Well, to an extent.
No, I don't mean like tell the world, but I mean they like are exposed to it. You see everybody's stuff. That's like
right. I've seen the worst of the worst, and I like to say that There were times that I was surprised that there were things I was still shocked by, but people are super creative. So I don't know.
Like, when you come in and you're asking questions because you see stuff that maybe like a family member wouldn't see, and then now that's been brought to life, right? Where it's something that they didn't know before.
Yeah.
So I think like, it's like the meme I recently saw was, make sure you have that friend, or it's the friend who's sitting there watching where the parents are like, oh, well, I know my kid more than anybody. And the husband's like, I know that person more than anybody. And the best friend's just in the background, like, yeah.
I thought you were going to refer to the thing I posted today. I thought it was more funny than anything that actually applied to my life currently, but it said, I do not feel bonita. I feel stressita. So.
Wow. Yeah. Again, like you're in it we're all in this together. A lot of people are feeling stressed out. I think it's just the nature of the times too. Like Amy and I were talking about how expensive groceries are, how expensive it is to live. Like there's just a lot of stressful situations out there. So if you are listening and you're stressed out, like one, know you're in good company and it's going to be okay. Like we'll get through it.
And if you need someone to talk to, I used to talk to family members all the time about after a loved one passed. I know that I talked to this one grandma. She lost her grandbaby. I talked to this woman on my personal phone on my days off, maybe 3 times a week for 6 months, because they still had not figured out what happened to the baby. And so sometimes people just need someone. So.
And if you do need someone, you can email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com, or you can message us on our Instagram page, Diary of a Death Investigator.
Oh, that was a great lead-in. I was like, oh.
And Amy and I are working on Halloween spooky season.
Yeah.
Amy has promised us some good stuff. Also, I might ask Amy to throw this one in here. I can't decide. Well, Amy and I were on our drive back, our 20-hour.
Yeah.
We listened to Small Town Murders. That's her podcast of choice. Ed Gein was one of the episodes. And if you don't know him, he's the guy. Well, he's special. He's a creep. He was, but I don't even know if he was necessarily like a serial killer. He was robbing Crips, right? He was going and stealing bodies. We do know he killed somebody, at least.
He killed a couple of people, and they are in different instances. So that's basically why they call them serial killers, because if it's a death that happens with like a pass of time in between, that's what makes them a serial killer. Whereas a mass murderer would be someone who kills a lot of people in that same time frame or without a rest period.
So the reason that he's become popular, I think recently, is because Netflix has this series called like the Monster series, I guess. Like you saw Jeffrey. Yeah. So Jeffrey Dahmer, I think, was the first one. Now you have the brothers or whatever for a second.
But Menendez brothers?
Yeah. They're the second.
Okay.
That's like a whole other story. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, because I started watching that. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that's what it was on. Because if it's Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm not interested. Sorry, we all know he's a weirdo.
But the one that is coming up is supposed to be about Ed Gein. So what I would like to do is do an episode on him. I'm not into retelling people's lives. Like that's not our podcast. But I would like to know how some of this was actually like, how it happened. Like, I want to know how he could go dig up bodies. I want to know how he could do this to bodies. And I want to know how bodies were preserved in this way. So Amy and I are going to do some research. I want to know how these things could happen, but I want to know them from a medical side point of view, not from like, he killed people and wore their faces. Like, I don't want to know.
Yeah, well, speaking of that too, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I've been wanting to talk about that one for a long time. So, because that's based upon.
Yeah, and you actually also, Gacy, right? You studied him in school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Amy says she knows some good stuff about him.
Yeah, well, the chainsaw, it's like when you've seen that happen to someone, you're like, oh. So that's why it was so fascinating to me, I guess. So,
but I also hate scary movies, so I probably haven't seen any of these scary movies. Again, the reason we do the
creepy child watching monster movies at the age of 4 or 3. So.
And by creepy, my parents weren't going to let her watch. Don't kid yourself. She was watching Abbott and Costello.
But it was like
scary,
Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman. And I renamed it myself to Monsters Get Together. And it is still my favorite movie. So I've been a weirdo since I was born.
Well, I think it takes different people to do certain things. So I think it's just, that's why you're special. This is what your specialty is in. But I do think these would be really cool stories from your point of view, not necessarily like the history. Like history is okay, but I want to know like how people's bodies get preserved. I want to know how
I'm
you
sure there's pictures out there. Oh, I used to cut off hands and fingers. For purposes of identification, they were already dead. Let me clarify. But yeah, so when you hear these stories about they were cut at this point, it probably didn't look great, or they knew what they were doing and they were cutting out the joints. So that takes someone with some medical knowledge. So important note.
So anyways, going back to, yes, spooky season's going to be spooky for us. Like we're really excited. I'll see Amy in a couple weeks and we'll hammer out some of these episodes so that we can get back on track for you guys. So as always, we appreciate you listening. And until next time.
Bye.